Welcome to my channel, shavers and shavettes. I hope you are all well. Today we're going to have a little discussion about brush choice, but first, as always, the gear. Razor for today is an ever-ready lather catcher. Not super familiar with the time that this one would have been made. I'm guessing a little bit later in the lather catcher timeline just due to the handle. The soap for today is from Barrister, and man, it is Barrister's Reserve Spice. As far as I'm concerned, I think this one is the most accurate representation of the Old Spice scent. Great performing soap with one issue. As you can maybe see, it is red, extremely red. So red that it has dyed some of my brushes pink. So as a result, I've decided to only use synthetics with it. The synthetic brush for today is from Yaqi. They just label it as 26 with their, or what they're calling anyway, the tuxedo fiber, black with white tips. They do have more natural looking fiber as well that I believe is the same, or at least gives you the same performance, just a different color pattern. So on to today's topic, synthetic brushes. I bought my first synthetic brush quite a long time ago, and it was not a good experience. I didn't enjoy using it. I felt like I was really fighting to build a lather and kind of wrote them off. I come in and out of trying synthetics over the years because I think one of the big plus points that we can say about synthetics is they tend to be much more affordable than their natural counterparts. So experimenting with the brushes, even though I haven't enjoyed most of what I've bought, it's still pretty reasonable. I'm not out the money that I would have been for a natural counterpart. And another reason that I wanted to experiment and get a good understanding of the different synthetic brushes that are available is, even though I don't have any specific issues with using natural fibers, whether it's badger, boar, horse, that can't be said for all people. And that's something that, even though, like I said, I don't have those opinions on it, I certainly can respect that. So I don't consider myself any sort of authority when it comes to shaving or shave products, but I did want to have a good understanding of what products are available so that I can make some recommendations to anybody who doesn't want to be using a natural product, a natural animal product, I should be clear. And that's fine. The biggest issue that I've had, and to some extent continue to have with synthetic fiber, is water retention. The older offerings really didn't hold water very well at all. It would just completely drain out as soon as you pulled the brush out of the water. That made it very difficult to create a good, thick, solid lather. The lather would start extremely dry, and trying to add more water it crosses over that point of being a good ratio, a good mix, and just would go straight into being too much water. The lather would get really thin and break. It just wouldn't be stable at all. With the more recent versions of the synthetic fibers, that's definitely not as much of an issue. They do hold water very well. The properties of how they hold that water is much different. With a natural fiber, whether it's boar, badger, horsehair, whatever type of brush you have, the hair itself absorbs some water, and that has an impact on how it reacts to the rest of the water that's not internally held inside of each individual hair, but how the brush as a whole retains water and how it let goes of that water. With synthetic, the fiber itself doesn't retain any water. It doesn't hold it. The water outside of the fiber is always outside of the fiber. As a result, it slides off much more easy. It lets go of that. The newer ones are a lot better, but they almost take it too far in a way. They hold water very well inside the core of the knot, but I've also noticed that they don't release it into the lather very well. It doesn't mix very well. For me though, that's easy enough to get around. I do treat the brush with a little more force, I guess, squishing it against the soap or against my face to kind of force that water that's held inside out into the mix. The quality of the brushes though, the nature of the synthetic fiber, even though I'm having to treat my brush a little more rough than I would need to with the natural brush, they still hold up very well. Another plus, or potentially a plus, in my experience with synthetic is they tend to shed much less frequently than with a natural brush. We don't see, or I don't see the fibers breaking nearly as often. Even when the brush is brand new, some shedding is going to be completely normal with any brush that you buy. It's been a very rare experience so far for me with a synthetic brush to where even 1 or 2 fibers would shed during the first couple of uses. So as far as longevity of the brush, I do think synthetic offers the advantage there. You can treat the brush a little more rough. You're going to have it last a lot longer. The individual fibers aren't breaking, and for whatever reason, it appears that the knots are much more secure and much more solid as well. As far as recommendations, what would I say? I think Yaqi, for my experience, has been an outstanding synthetic brush. They do get a lot of really good reviews online as well. Simpson's has their Sovereign fiber in their, I am never going to pronounce this correctly, but in their Trafalgar line, T1, T2, T3. I have a T2 and a T3, and for my money, the T2 is vastly superior. The T3 is much more reminiscent, even though it's the same fiber as the T2. I feel like it's much more similar to the old style fiber experience that I've had. I don't enjoy using the T3 nearly as much as the T2. Now, online they get very similar reviews, and I think some of the sites, the T3 even bumps up the average review a little higher than the T2. So that's just my experience that I prefer the two. West Coast Shaving, their house brand, also has a very nice synthetic fiber option available that I've got a couple from them that I enjoy using. So when it comes down to it, overall, I think more options are performing better than they have in the past. Just like any other product though, you're going to have to try several and see what you prefer the best. When it comes to strong points of synthetic, for me, I think the strongest point, kind of like in the example with this Barrister and Man soap, is they don't absorb any of the residue or any of the soap. Now, what do I mean by that? This I haven't seen as much as I have in the past, but when kind of this current generation of soft soap, artisan soap, started coming out, the soaps that a lot of people call super fatted, there was a lot of concern that they are going to damage your natural fiber brushes. These soaps don't damage your brush. You're not going to break them by using the soap. With all of that extra oil that hasn't saponified, that hasn't been made into soap, it will absorb into the natural fibers. Every soap or every cream that you use will leave a residue of some sort that will have to be cleaned out on occasion. If you're not cleaning your brushes and you've been shaving for more than a year, I highly recommend to do a search on cleaning brushes. You will gain a lot of performance back. So what happens? You're not damaging your brush, or in my experience, you're not damaging it. You're just increasing the frequency for how often you will need to clean your brush when you're using these super fatted options. That is not a problem, or at least not nearly as much of a problem with the synthetics. Just like I talked about earlier, how the synthetic fiber doesn't absorb any water, it doesn't absorb the oils, it doesn't absorb the scent. it doesn't absorb the color, which in the case of this barrister and man is a nice thing. So there you have it. Nobody asked, but I gave it to everybody. My opinion on the current state of synthetic brushes. Not nearly as bad as they were in the past. I still prefer natural choices, but I have been able to find some synthetic offerings that are a pleasure to use. They make me happy. I enjoy my shave. Moving on, if you are new to the channel, or even if you've missed a few videos, you may have noticed my absence for a little while. I was having some computer issues that just got worse after my last channel update. I went from having a poor performing PC to one that completely let the smoke out. So I've been completely without a computer for a while. Had to break down and buy a pre-built offering because parts are scarce to unavailable for anybody who's wanting to build a PC. When you do find them, they are way too expensive. But end of the story, I'm back up and running with a PC that I am extremely happy with. I've been experimenting quite a bit with different settings. I'm using a different software now to help speed things along. Playing around with rendering. It takes me about 5 minutes now to render in 4K, when the old one was taking excess of 30 minutes to keep the 1080. So I'm very happy with that. I'm excited to be getting back into making more videos again. And as always, I am so grateful that you have chosen to come along with me. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope you have a great day.